Speech on. 3 of 3 Wi-Fi bars. 3 of 3 Wi-Fi bars. Orientation lock. 3 p.m.
Okay.
Speech off.
John, how's it going? Are we ready to get started?
We are. Let me do a brief introduction here. Good afternoon, everyone. Hello from Phoenix, Arizona, home of the Arizona Technology Access Program. I'll be putting some links in the chat window. One's going to be to the ASTAP website and also the IHD website, but that will be coming after I introduce Daryl. But first, my name is John McDermott, and I work at the Institute for Human Development in Flagstaff, Arizona. And we are a University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities located on Northern Arizona University's campus. I'll put that link in the window for people to access at any time that they want. A couple of housekeeping things for the webinar. This is a listen-only webinar. So if you have any questions or comments, please utilize the chat area. What you'll see towards the top of some of the pods, you'll see an icon with 4 arrows. This will allow for a full screen mode on your device or computer for that particular pod. So if you wanted to see the mirroring iPad in a larger screen, you can click those 4 arrows and make that large for yourself. Also, to the lower right, you'll see a file share pad, and Daryl has prepared some notes there. It's in PDF form, so you can download those notes to your desktop or your device and access the notes afterwards. If you need the TXT file, please email us at ihd@nau.edu, and we'll send you that text file, TXT file, as soon as we can. Like we said earlier, that chat pod is for questions. In order to provide a venue for questions for all participants, if you cannot access the chat pod, please send your questions to ihd@nau.edu, and I'll be monitoring that email during the presentation. So if there's difficulty in accessing the chat pod, which would be choice number 1 for adding a question, you can send an email to me, and I'll be able to ask Daryl the question during the question and answer period. So we'll start rolling here. I'm going to hand this off to Daryl. And thank you very much, Daryl, for coming into the ASTAP office to do this presentation.
Well, you're most welcome. It's an honor to be here today. And we want to make sure that, so we have the ASTAP website, aztap.org. What is the IHD website for people who would be interested in visiting that?
It is nau.edu/SBS/IHD. I'll put it right in the pod.
Right, and just for those who can't access that easily,
No problem.
I want to make sure we give all the information. Okay, so I'm Daryl Hilliker. I am an accessibility consultant, accessibility advocate, or accessibility evangelist, whatever you would like to refer to me as. And I've worked a great deal inside and outside of the mainstream and assistive technology fields. So I'm a blind person. I've experienced what I'm talking about today. This is coming from both my experience in the practice of technology as well as my actual experience as a blind person. Today we are going to talk about a plan for evaluating and testing iOS apps for accessibility. Now,
Testing and teaching iOS VoiceOver app accessibility. Introduction. Title.
Okay, so you're going to hear a little bit of VoiceOver, which we'll get into in a moment. We're going to hear a little bit of speech each time I switch slides on the iPad here. I'll let VoiceOver read the title of each slide. So this is the introduction. So
Hold on, Daryl. Can we check the mirror feed on the screen? I got a blank screen right now.
oops. Yeah. Let's see here. How would you want to do that here?
Screen curtain on.
No, it's not the
Screen
screen
curtain off.
curtain. Oh yeah, you want to check my computer then? So, yeah, the part of this technology, the reason I've actually come to the office instead of operate this webinar from home is because there's unfortunately, some inaccessible tech involved. So I wonder if something is wrong with the Adobe Connect.
Let's try to share your screen again.
Is that what you just did?
No, I just looked at your Adobe Connect and it said that it's trying to load.
Great.
So we can exit out of sharing the screen and then see if we can share the screen again.
Okay. By the way, everyone, on the VoiceOver is the screen reading solution for blind people on Mac and on iOS. And on the Mac side, Adobe Connect does not work at all with VoiceOver. It's just I can just read the window title that says Adobe Connect add-on and nothing else. So John is sorting the Adobe Connect stuff out.
We had it live the whole time. And now
Not the webinar starts, we don't have it live anymore.
Huh.
Let me see, is the QuickTime, is it actually showing anything?
It's showing the black window, so we're back to the window.
But the curtain off now.
The curtain is off.
Definitely. Let me just check something, make sure we're capturing. You know, we've got the
Title, body,
here, let's just do this.
voiceover off,
What is it showing now?
Still the black screen.
Okay, so that's not
voiceover on,
already
keynote,
did.
title, rectangle, introduction, screen curtain on, screen curtain off,
Let's restart QuickTime.
Yeah, let's try that.
title, rectangle, introduction,
All right, let's try this. Just loading quick. QuickTime didn't get in my dock, so I gotta find it here. Here's QuickTime. Yeah, that's really unfortunate because we did have this working for a long time, for like 45 minutes prior to this.
I wonder if it times out in any way.
I would.
We have your webcam working, so we can see your webcam on the screen.
Awesome. Well, we're gonna.
All right, a little bit of, we see all the slides.
And we're gonna get. And there's the audio from the iPad now too. Okay.
Okay, now we're on your keynote.
Awesome.
All
Good,
right.
good. Woo! I love it when things work again. I'm gonna stop that. Okay.
We have a request for maybe slowing down voiceover speech for newbies.
Yeah, it works. Typically, the default. Wait, what just happened? disconnect this? We didn't disconnect the speaker. That's the...
Calendar.
There we go.
Wednesday. FaceTime.
All right, so we're going to turn
Double
the
tap
speech
to open.
down.
Headings. Containers.
Wait.
Speech rate. 61%. 56%.
All right, let's try that. All right.
iTunes Store.
Okay.
App Switcher. Keynote.
Thanks very much
Active.
for the suggestion. That was a good one.
Keynote. Presentations. Button. Undo. Test font. Insert. Share. Tools. Start slideshow. Button. Title. Rectangle. Introduction.
Okay. How's it look, John?
It's looking good.
All right, let's roll, folks. Okay. So today we're going to talk about a plan for evaluating and testing iOS apps for accessibility with VoiceOver. And that just means we're evaluating and testing to be sure that apps, that run on iPad, iPod Touch, or iPhone can be used by a blind or low vision person. That's essentially what we're aiming for. So on iOS devices, there is a built-in feature called VoiceOver. VoiceOver is a type of assistive technology known as a screen reader. Since blind people aren't able to see the screen, we need a screen reader that takes the on-screen information and provides it in Braille and or speech output for us to access. When software, websites, and other technologies are designed in such a way that they meet standards, what are called accessibility standards or accessibility guidelines or accessibility best practices, when they meet those things, they are accessible to a blind person. When they're accessible to a blind person, then we can be fully included. So, what I'd like to do is read. I'm going to need to read this off because it's a little long, but I think it's very poignant. Because we're talking about accessibility here. So, in a letter to a company CEO I wrote a few months ago, I wrote the following in my explanation to what is accessibility. So I wrote, quote, "True accessibility means that all parts of a platform's features, benefits, information, policies, procedures, products, responsibilities, rights, services, and technologies are developed and implemented in ways that are usable by people with disabilities." Essentially, that means every aspect of a piece of technology, in this case, an iOS app, is something that can be used by everybody, whether or not they have sight or other disabilities. We say that is accessible. And it is important to be accessible in order to include everyone. So, if you're a developer and you're making your iOS app, and especially if you've been receiving requests to make that accessible, then your choice is, do you want to include as many of your users as possible, or do you want to leave someone out in the cold? Is what we're kind of aiming at here. So, accessibility to VoiceOver works best when apps are deliberately developed for accessibility and when blind people are considered during development and testing. Apple provides lots and lots of good guidelines for making apps accessible. So,
Starting VoiceOver. Title. Introduction. Title. Starting
Here we go.
VoiceOver. Title. Rectangle. Starting VoiceOver.
okay.
Introduction. Title. Starting voiceover. Title. Rectangle. Starting voiceover. The plan. Title. Starting voiceover. Title. Introduction. Title.
Okay,
Rectangle. Introduction. Testing and teaching
My
iOS
slides
voiceover
are
app
out of order.
accessibility.
I'm sorry
Type
about this.
testing and teaching iOS voiceover app accessibility. Introduction. Starting voiceover. The plan. Title. Reporting and resolving accessibility bugs. The plan. Title. Starting voiceover. Introduction. Title. Rectangle.
Stop.
Starting voiceover.
There we go. Okay. We'll just go with that. There is a slide that is not in the right order, but we'll just go through that, and then this starting voiceover will be the meat. We'll start at the meat of our presentation anyway. Okay. So we are talking about a plan for making this situation better, right? For making apps more accessible, for teaching people how to be, how to work with accessible apps, and for how to advocate for better app accessibility. So why do we need a plan? What are the benefits? So advocates can identify issues to developers in a systematic way so that developers can fix their issues and make their apps better for everyone moving forward. Developers can use a plan to test their own apps as they're coding to make sure that those apps are going to be fully accessible. Decision makers can use this plan to evaluate apps that they're considering purchasing for their educational institution or government agency or other company or organization, to decide whether or not they should purchase that particular technology. Because ultimately, if it's not meeting accessibility guidelines, it shouldn't be purchased. And educators can evaluate apps to help their blind and low vision students learn to use the apps, and they can also make app recommendations. This app is particularly accessible, or this one is not. You may want to use another alternative instead, such as a more accessible app. Okay. So now we are onto the slide that we're actually showing, which is how to start VoiceOver. So, I know some of you on this webinar will be very familiar with this, and some others will not be. VoiceOver is built into the iOS device. However, of course, it's not running by default. So there are, for a sighted person, the way you turn on VoiceOver is you push the home button, which is also the round button near the bottom middle of the screen, and you tap on Settings, then you tap on General, then you tap on Accessibility, and then you go into VoiceOver, tap on VoiceOver, and you hold and swipe to the right on the VoiceOver switch to turn it on. Drag it to turn it on. Then you can turn on the Speak Hints switch. Once the VoiceOver will be on at this point, so then you will double tap on Speak Hints. If it's off, then you'll double tap it to turn it on. And finally, if you would like to get the best experience possible with your accessibility testing, you will turn on the screen curtain by tapping the screen 3 times with 3 fingers. That's called a 3-finger triple tap, and that turns on the screen curtain. So if you're a blind person, of course, there are several ways to start VoiceOver. If your device is set up to do so, you can just triple click the home button. That toggles VoiceOver on and off. You can also ask Siri. You can say, turn on VoiceOver. And if it's off, it'll be turned on for you. And finally, you can always go into iTunes and go into the accessibility configuration for your device and turn on that way if the device is connected to your computer. Not the recommended way to have to turn on VoiceOver, but it does work.
Title. Rectangle. Starting VoiceOver. The plan. Title. Reporting and resolving accessibility
part
bugs.
of the problem is there's a long delay.
Title.
There we go. Okay. There's the plan. Okay. So now we get to the plan itself. Okay. And for those of you who are looking at the text, it's a lot of text. there are a couple things I'm going to go over, and I'm going to quickly summarize 13 items in this plan. What it is okay. So we have a way of exploring apps. So you're going to open up the app. If you're a developer, you know it's the app you're developing. If you're an educator, you're going to open up the app that you downloaded from the App Store. And if you use VoiceOver to do that, then you double tapped on it. Anyway, the app is going to be in question is going to be on your screen. The first thing you do is tap the top of the screen with 4 fingers. That takes VoiceOver to the very top of the screen. It's going to be the first item that's accessible to a blind person. And then you're going to evaluate. You're going to go through the screen by flicking to the right. Once you're going to flick to the right, you're going to listen to what you heard when you tap the top with 4 fingers. You'll hear the first thing, and then you're going to start flicking to the right, pausing after each flick to listen to what VoiceOver is telling you. When you do this on the main screen of the app, you're going to consider the following 13 items. Number 1, are all controls labeled? So when you flick to something, does it say, enter destination, or does it say destination, or does it say a bunch of letters and numbers, or does it just say button? In other words, does it make sense? Does it say something that makes sense? If it's a button in the upper left of the screen, that you got to when you tap the top of the screen with 4 buttons, does it say back? Something like that, or does it say I see arrow white 22? Seriously. Anyway, so are all controls labeled? Double tap the item. If it's a button or something that should go to another screen in the app, if you double tap it, does that work? Because in VoiceOver, since we can't just single tap things, or we would be selecting things all the time, you actually double tap buttons and controls to activate them in VoiceOver. So do all buttons respond to a double tap? Third, does VoiceOver stay focused? So if you're flicking right through your app, through a particular screen in your app, does VoiceOver stay where you left it, or does it kind of jump around the screen, jump all over the place? You'd be surprised the number of apps that are pretty jumpy when you go through them with VoiceOver. When you have a situation where you are selecting items, so for example, if you are shopping and you have a shopping cart and there are some items that are selected and some that are not, or you're ordering food through something like DoorDash or something like that, and there are items that could be selected or not selected, does VoiceOver say selected, or otherwise tell you that the item you're looking at is active or is not active? And number 5 is refresh. If there's a list of items that a sighted person would pull down with 1 finger to update the list, does swiping down with 3 fingers do the same thing when VoiceOver is turned on? Number 6, is everything available to VoiceOver? Or do you have items on the screen visually that VoiceOver doesn't read when you flick across them? Number 7, custom gestures. Does your app feature lots and lots of unusual custom gestures that are most iOS users don't normally use? You have L gestures or circles or things like that that are not typical. If so, have you put in custom actions for VoiceOver users? And I'll be showing these things momentarily. Visual cues. So does your app require use of color or other kind of visual only elements? If so, do you provide that information to VoiceOver? So if I'm shopping for shoes, you know, can I make sure I get the black shoes, or am I going to get the pink shoes because I know what color they were? Similarly, if I'm being, if I'm going to be picked up by someone, if I've, you know, if I order a ride with Lyft, Lyft tells me the color of the car. If I order a ride with Uber, Uber shows a picture of the car, but they don't expose the color of the car to VoiceOver. So if I'm blind, I don't know the color of the car that's picking me up. Number 9, logical non-visual order. So, you know, the relationship is sometimes important between things on the screen. If it is important, has that been, you know, properly, does the VoiceOver user know how to work with that and know that it's important and know which thing comes first, second, third, so on and so forth. Hints. So if you have, you know, a control that requires some explanation, have VoiceOver hints been turned on, and are they working? So after it says, you know, after it says destination button, does it show you? Does it give you more information about what you're supposed to do there? You want to make sure too that hints aren't the only way that you can access something. So if somebody chooses not to turn their VoiceOver hints on, it's still important that they be able to use the app effectively. Audio ducking. So basically that means, are we making sure that when audio plays, that it doesn't drown out VoiceOver? VoiceOver is able to, when it needs to speak, it's able to come in, and the audio from your app's player will actually go quieter so that the blind person can still hear VoiceOver. Does the two-finger, okay, let's go back and explain this differently. Can you use the back button in the upper left corner of the screen? So VoiceOver users have a two-finger right-left gesture that they can use. It's called the scrub gesture, the Z-form gesture, that is a shortcut for that back button in the upper left. Does that work in the app? And finally, I know this is pretty exhausting, do advanced features like direct touch work? Are there Braille? Is there Braille support? Is there good Braille support? And are there keyboard shortcut commands? And does the Magic Tap work? The Magic Tap is a cool VoiceOver feature where you double tap the screen with two fingers to play and pause audio. Does that work or not work? Okay, so those are the 13 primary features that we look for in this accessibility plan. Once you've done that with your home screen on an app, you go back and you look at each of those controls and you double tap each one. You reiterate the 13 items for every screen in the app, and you take detailed notes about anything that's not working the way it should. And that goes to reporting and resolving bugs. So, you know, if you are an advocate, you want to do this. You want to send in very detailed, structured bug reports to developers so they can fix things. Of course, if you're a developer, you want to do this so that you're detailed ways so that you're taking good notes so you can fix your code. So, and what I'd like to do is explain what information is included in a proper bug report. The first thing is a description. Just give a few words. I'm going to go ahead and just put this.
Reporting and resolving accessibility bugs. Title,
sorry about that,
rectangle.
folks. There you
Reporting
go.
and resolving accessibility bugs.
Okay, so as you can see, so the first item is we need a description, a few concise words describing the issue. It's just that straightforward. Steps to reproduce. Write every step that you took to get to the accessibility bug. And I will be going over this in just a moment, exactly what this is. Okay. So steps to reproduce. Current behavior. So what happens right now? What is the result of the issue? What is it? How is the problem behaving right now? Expected behavior. What would you like to happen instead? Instead of the bad thing that's happening now, what would be the expected correct thing that should be happening instead? And finally, app version, hardware information, and iOS version. So tell the developer, I'm running version 60.0.0.137 of the Facebook app on an iPhone 6 running iOS 10 public beta 3, for instance. By the way, you probably don't want to use betas for public iOS apps, but you could in some situations if you are a beta tester, so there you go.
Daryl, I have a question in the chat about the specific bug reporting that you're discussing right now. And it says, is there a website that has app reviews specifically using this framework?
Oh, fascinating. So there is not yet. The best website I would say for app reviews right now for accessible apps is applevis.com, applevis.com. They do have app reviews, but no, they do not use, this is a new framework. I've been developing this framework over the past 7 months, this accessibility plan, and I'm not aware of any websites yet that will review apps and say that they're following this plan. This is a new plan that I'm promoting. I will tell you, however, that the bug reporting that we're talking about right now is a standard nomenclature that software developers use for, reporting bugs. The whole description, steps to reproduce, current behavior, expected behavior, and so on. That is all based on standard developer, understandings of how software works. However, no, there's no app reviews that are based on it. So I would invite you to be someone who does that. Visit a website like applevis.com or maybe iAccessibility.net and start, submitting them that way. That would be wonderful. Okay, so speaking of bugs, we're going to get to
example bug report.
Here we go. Here is an example bug report. This is an example of how to report an accessibility bug. And I will just quickly read it for those of you who would benefit from that. So this is description. Event invitation details. Inaccessible to VoiceOver. This was written against the Facebook iOS app. Steps to reproduce. Number 1, turn on VoiceOver. Number 2, open the Facebook app. Number 3, open any event invitation. Number 4, tap the top of the screen with 4 fingers. You'll see that this is, kind of going, using the accessibility plan in this bug report. Flick right through the event invitation. So just flick right. Each time you flick, listen to VoiceOver, then flick again, listen to VoiceOver, and so on and so forth. Number 6, notice that the date, location, time, and other important details are not spoken. The current behavior, event invitations, are inaccessible and useless to blind people. The expected behavior, blind Facebook users should be able to access event invitations on terms of equality with their sighted Facebook friends. All right, so that is the accessibility bug for a feature in Facebook. Let's go to accessibility testing.
Title, rectangle, accessibility testing.
There we go.
Title, rectangle, accessibility testing.
I do apologize for the delay. There's a little bit of a lag and delay in this, but that's okay. All right, so developers test with blind and with blind alpha and beta testers. So alpha testers are internal testers. They're usually employees of the company. You know, it's when you're doing alpha testing, it's rough. It's pretty rough around the edges app. Not something that most of us would really care to use. Then when you do beta testing, that means you're releasing it to a small group of users and saying, here, we think we pretty much got this mostly well baked. We'd like you to kick the tires and see how it actually works out in the real world. So we need to have blind people and other people with disabilities involved in those testing processes. Also, there's user acceptance testing. So this is where, you know, a company goes to their client. They've developed an app for a client, or this happens internally within organizations. The software engineering department has built an app or a piece of technology. They want the department in question to test to make sure it's what they're looking for. Blind and other people with disability in that user acceptance testing process. So advocates can test and provide feedback in a detailed manner in this way, and educators can test apps before recommending them, and they can help their blind students learn how to explore and use these apps if they're accessible. And finally, decision makers can test apps, and they should not purchase the app if it's not accessible according to Apple's accessibility guidelines. Okay. So
Resources.
finally, we
Type.
come to resources. I don't, expect everybody to note all these resources just, from this slide. So again, there are notes available if you want or need them. I'm just going to recommend to everybody, if you go to appleviz.com/developers, even if you're not a developer, you can go to appleviz.com/developers, look for the teaching and testing iOS VoiceOver teaching and testing accessibility plan on iOS or on appleviz.com/developers, and that is a link to this plan in excruciating detail. You can even discover a little bit about how the plan came together and the process involved in editing it. So you can also I would recommend visiting Apple's websites. There's apple.com/accessibility for most of us, and for the developer community, there's developer.apple.com/accessibility. So a lot of other resources given on this slide, and again, those are available on the notes. Of course, let's not forget ASTAP, aztap.org, nau.edu/sbs/IHD for the Institute for Human Development. So finally,
Contact information.
contact information. There you go. You can reach me a few different ways.
Title. Rect.
Have we gone off? There we go. Okay. Anyway, you can reach me a few different ways. I'm Daryl Hilliker. Send me an email, daryl.hilliker@gmail.com, or you can access me on Daryl, DARRELL. That's this my contact information. I would love to hear from anyone who is interested in this this work, and I'd be happy to.
Body.
Finally,
Rectangle. Daryl Chandrao Hilliker.
I would like to show
Accessibility
you.
Consultant. Email. Daryl.Hilliker.
I'd like to show you a couple of wonderfully accessible and sadly inaccessible
App switcher.
app features.
Facebook. Active.
I just double
Swipe up with
tap,
3 fingers.
so I have an iPad with VoiceOver enabled, and I just double tap the home button for the app switcher. And let's go to Netflix.
Twitter with
Click
it.
to the left,
Netflix. Active.
and I'm in Netflix now.
Close. Button.
Netflix has done a lot of work to improve the accessibility of their app. However, I'm going to show you one screen
Play Fuller
where
House. Button.
we've sadly fallen a bit short.
Rating 5 stars out of 5.
Double tap.
Rate this title.
So I'm a blind person. I'd like to rate Fuller House. I'd like to make my voice known. So I'm going to go to the top of the screen with 4 fingers.
Rate this title.
Rate this title. Flick to the right. Click. Bang. Hit the wall. Flick to the left.
Rate this title. Rate this
That's
title.
all. That's all, folks. And you want to know what else? I can't even do anything here. If I want to do Netflix anymore, I have to
FaceTime.
go back into the app
Double
switcher.
tap to open App Switcher. Keynote. Netflix.
3
Active.
fingers
Closing
flick up
Netflix.
to turn off
Keynote.
Netflix.
Active.
And I'd have to go back into Netflix.
FaceTime.
I have to restart the app, essentially, in order to recover from that screen. Really, really awful, inaccessible implementation there. As you can see, it in no way follows the plan, right? No labeled controls, things that are invisible to VoiceOver, just it kind of breaks everything in the plan I just talked about, right? So my exercise to you would be to at least consider a mental note of how would I write a bug report and send it to Netflix? Even better yet, write a bug report and send it to Netflix. The more of us who do it, the more likely they are to actually fix it. Okay, so let's go on a happier note now. Let's go to an app
Switcher.
that's wonderfully
Keynote.
accessible.
Home. Keynote. Facebook. Twitterific. Active.
Twitterific. Okay. That is
Refreshing
a
content.
Twitter client
Finished
for
refreshing.
iOS.
Sidebar. Techies.
So I just went according to the plan. Tap the top with 4 fingers, flicking to the right. I have a list that I call techies. And I'm just flicking through the right now.
Options. Button. Compose. Button. Find. Search field. Double
You can
tap
see
to edit.
everything is very labeled and very accessible.
Applevis. Forum topic. Buying a Mac on Saturday. Hopefully Applevis.com. A11YG meetup. 9 highlights from our Q&A with a web accessibility auditor out. Lice Aurelio De Rosa. Friendly reminder. The app W3C has a dedicated page that shows all the tools and validators it provides. Applevis.
Okay, so I just tapped the screen with 2 fingers to stop VoiceOver. So we're on a tweet. Now, Twitterific has, if you're sighted, they have all kinds of cool little gestures for doing different things with your tweets. They wouldn't be very accessible to VoiceOver users. However, they have created actions for these gestures. So if I flick down instead of right, these are all the things I can do.
Applevis.com/forum/iOS Gammy.
That's the link.
Reply. Like. Retweet. Quote tweet. From Applevis. Applevis. More options. Share. Activate item. Default action.
Okay, so the point being that instead of the gestures that might not work so well for us, alternatives have been provided that make all of these options available to us, even though we can't see. So I can get into all the wonderfulness that is Twitterific, but we don't have time here. So I just wanted to show you an example of something good that is a mainstream app that many sighted people use, way, way, way more than blind people use, but yet it is virtually 100% accessible. And in almost every update, Twitterific makes some reference to fixing some VoiceOver issue. So they're committed to it. The company is called Icon Factory, and the app is called Twitterific in the iOS App Store. So I'll leave it
FaceTime.
to anyone who has any
9:41 a.m.
questions. John, did we get anything on the email?
We had a couple of requests for where you can see this webinar after today, and
Okay.
we will be archiving it on IHD's YouTube channel.
Okay.
So I'll put that link into the chat area, but other than that, no questions for the email.
Okay. How about the in-band in the Adobe Connect?
We had that one question. I put up links for AppleViz.
Appleviz.com. Awesome.
.com, and there's actually a /bugs where
Yep, we can do that too.
And then I put the information app developers slash. You can put in developers, but it changes to information app developers.
Yep.
But I put that link up as well.
Awesome.
Seems like there are people typing, so we can just open it up to questions right now.
That'll be great.
And I'll read them as soon as they come through.
And I will say, as far as the only reason I didn't mention appleviz.com/bugs earlier is it's great if you want to submit something on there. That's great. That's for the AppleViz community, and I do recommend you do that. But just please keep in mind that doesn't send a bug report to the developer. So if you want to submit there, that's wonderful. But please don't forget to actually send the bug report where it can count. Send it to the developer so that they can get on that. Woo! Thanks, everybody, for enduring my first ever webinar.
I think you did a great job. And the idea about sending Netflix a couple of emails talking about the accessibility, or all at the same time talking about something specifically, I feel like that would be a good action plan in one way or another.
Yeah, it's great. They did a wonderful job on a lot of the app, but then you get to this screen and it's kind of a roadblock. It's like, what? Who came up with that?
I have one question in an email. It says, if you want to learn more about how to learn VO, where should you go? Do you do training?
I do training. Contact me and we'll talk about it. And I also have access to other people who can do training. So either way, we can discuss that. There is a wonderful website. Let's see. It's called VoiceOver-easy.net. VoiceOver-easy.net. And that is a very good, it's a tutorial, a real beginner-based tutorial on how VoiceOver works. If you go to appleviz.com, again, we've had a link to appleviz.com. There's also a link on there that says, getting started with your first iOS device. You can go in there, and it's all based on VoiceOver. There are, let's see, I'm aware of a couple of apps in the App Store that help you learn VoiceOver as well. One of them is called the Looktel, Looktel VoiceOver tutorial. Oh, and must I not forget the information that's built into the iOS device itself. So once you go into, if you have VoiceOver on, you can go into, back up. Go into Settings, General, Accessibility, VoiceOver, and then inside that screen there is a area that says VoiceOver Practice. And that will, if you double tap on that, it gives you an area where you can practice the different gestures. So you can flick left, flick right. It'll actually tell you what that gesture means. So I recommend VoiceOver Practice mode.
I have a bunch of thank yous, and thank you, very helpful, great work.
Thanks.
And lastly, the VoiceOver Easy tutorial site. I'm trying to bring it up. VoiceOver.
Is it VoiceOver-easy.net?
Yeah, and then I Googled it.
I could have it wrong. It's kind of new to me anyway.
Yeah, it's showing up as voiceover.easy.net, but it's not linking.
It's not working, huh?
There is a Apple Viz connection, it looks like, and it even has that on there. Let me see if I can open it and see if it'll open through Apple Viz. I feel like the site is down right now. It's just kind of hanging on the load, but.
Oh, okay. So it normally is there. It's just having some kind of technical issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting an empty HTML area in Safari. on the Mac right now. So
Yeah, and Mary online is also saying that it won't load either.
I'm sorry about that, guys. I think if you try it again later, I think it's a thing. So I think it just isn't working right now. I always dislike giving people links to things that are dead ends. So sorry about that. But if you go to appleviz.com, there's a getting started with your first iOS device. I'm confident that should work. And the practice mode, of course, works because it's built in. You also keep in mind, and this is one of the resources at some point, go to apple.com/accessibility. There's all of their accessibility features. Apple is really, really proficient, at promoting their accessibility features.
3 of 3 Wi-Fi 5 of 5 bars. Signal strength. Status
Sorry
bar
about
up.
that. Okay. Anyway, it came up finally, by the way. I have it up here now. It just something is wrong with their site apparently. All right.
Well, we're looking at about 24 minutes left. If there's any sort of questions that anyone would like to ask, you can do it one of two ways. You can put it in the chat area, or you can send an email to ihd@nau.edu. We have another thanks so much, very informative.
Yep, I appreciate it. And again, anyone who would like to talk about this stuff further can, send me an email or a tweet if you're on Twitter. Just chat with me. I'd be happy to connect. And this is my thing. I love doing accessibility work. So, and hey, if you're a developer out there and you want your app tested for VoiceOver accessibility, let's talk about it.
There is a question that says, what are your favorite accessible apps besides Twitter?
Okay. Awesome. Well, I use a lot of apps. Most of them are very accessible. Some of them have accessibility problems. One of my favorite fully accessible apps is called TuneIn Radio. 2 words, Tune, TUNEIN. Get that in the App Store. It's a free app. I believe there's some in-app purchases you can get if you want those, but the basics are free. And that is an app that lets you access thousands of radio stations around the world. I listen to CNN and my local NPR station, KJZZ, through that app. I listen to something called ICRT through that app. So listen to a few radio stations through that. I use, wow, it's hard because I will use a lot of apps. I use, excuse me, I use a lot of the built-in iOS features all the time too. I use Mail a lot. Of course, I take, my wife and I take a lot of pictures of our baby daughter using the camera, and then we send those on Facebook. Facebook is what I call a mostly accessible app that we use a lot. So I use a lot of things. I use Hulu, which is partially accessible enough to be usable. Hulu Plus. Kindle, you read books on Kindle. Use the Audible app. Audible app is very accessible. So there's a lot of, if I had to pick a favorite though, I think Twitterific is, like I said, one of my favorite apps because of the effort that the developer takes to make that really accessible. Of course, there's Uber and Lyft, which are quite accessible. Uber's broken things once in a while, and they usually go back and fix them, however, so there you go.
Well, we have Allison who troubleshot the VoiceEasy
VoiceOver Easy?
VoiceOverEasy.net, and it appears it doesn't work on Chrome. And she checked it on Firefox, and it's loading. And I just double checked it on Firefox and put it into the chat area. So if you're out there and you're using Chrome or another browser that doesn't work, you might have to download Firefox and access it from there.
You know what, everybody? You know what? Allison knows what the heck she's doing. She's got it going on. So when something happens on Adobe Connect, even though it's totally inaccessible with VoiceOver, VoiceOver tells me Adobe Connect needs attention. If I go to the window chooser and select the window, it remains blank, however. But yet it needs my attention. Haha.
And we have a confirmation Mary checked. She was on Chrome, so she's thanking Allison.
Yay! I love this. I love how people, communicate and get things going and working. And talk about accessible apps. I use Roger, which is like a two-way radio app. We love those, right? Some of us blind folks anyway love those two-way radio apps. But anyway, I'm on a number of groups and a number of individual conversations. So if you want to find me on Roger, my handle is my ham radio call sign. I know this is really, really geeky. It's N as in November, U as in uniform, the number 7, I as in India. If you want to find me on Roger. Roger is very accessible. And again, it's another example of a company that actually does seem to take accessibility seriously. So they are out there. There is hope.
I have a comment from Allison, and she says, on blindaccessjournal.com, Daryl did a podcast that covered accessible apps, TapTapC and BeSpecular?
Yes. Those are my favorite apps too. Kind of the reason I didn't mention them before now is they are accessible apps, but they are accessible apps that are designed for blind people. So I still could have mentioned them, I guess. These apps are examples of solutions that let you take a picture of something, and that picture gets sent into the cloud, essentially, and then you record a request. In the case of BeSpecular, TapTapC doesn't have this feature, but anyway, you record a request. You say, "Could you please tell me the temperature on the oven's display?" Whereas TapTapC just sends the picture without any input from you. And then what comes back is an answer, one or more answers to the picture. So you can, like I said, show a picture of an oven display and get the temperature off of it. Another thing that Allison and I like to do actually is we have lots and lots and lots of pictures of scenes with our 7-month-old baby daughter in them, and we send them up to BeSpecular. We get a description from a volunteer on BeSpecular, and then we resave that picture back to our camera roll with the description tag in place. So we now have a described copy of that picture. I love it. It's amazing. TapTapC has a similar feature, but the picture descriptions don't usually seem to be nearly as good as BeSpecular. BeSpecular is, we're going to put links to the BeSpecular, BeSpecular.com. And TapTapC is TapTapSeeApp, TapTapCapp.com.
We have a question from Jacelyn, and they're asking, I'm working with an individual who runs his own business and is looking for an app to validate the amount when someone writes a check. Could BeSpecular do this?
Okay. The answer is yes. Since it would be a picture of the check and you could do that, I would advise, though, you keep in mind that there's no way to guarantee confidentiality because these are just volunteers that are on the other end, and the checks are going to have people's names on them and all kinds of, account numbers and routing numbers and things that are. I would recommend. There is one other solution that might work for you. Okay, two other solutions. One of them is the KNFB reader. K and then NFB is in National Federation of the Blind Reader. It doesn't work if it doesn't work super well unless you're really, really good at taking pictures of things. Then it sometimes works okay. We can use it sometimes to identify our mail, but it doesn't really do so with helping us actually read our mail, for instance. If you're going to use KNFB Reader, I recommend using a stand that you put your phone on. If you want to contact me, I can give you, more information about all this stuff. There's that solution, KNFB Reader.
Screen locked.
I also like the possibility of something called CrowdViz, 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 I believe crowdviz.com. And that is a situation where you receive help from a sighted person, but you pay. It's less volunteer oriented. And you might check into CrowdViz. They might have some confidentiality protections in place for that. Somebody's checks might be a little complicated. Reading your mail might or might not be. Keep in mind, KNFB is OCR. It's optical character recognition right on your phone. So if it works for you, you can use that one safely. You're not sharing anything in the cloud. But these other apps share data in the cloud, and it's just complicated. So, just keep in mind if you have medications that have your name on them. If you don't want some strange person to know what meds you take, then you might not want to use Bespecular to read your medications.
And either Jacelyn or Jacqueline states, thank you very much.
You're welcome. And again, contact me if you want to investigate some other kind of solutions. I'd be happy to help.
And another comment from Mary stating, we need another hour. And she adds smile emoticon at the end of it.
Thanks, Mary. I really have enjoyed doing this, and I'm glad that some of you have enjoyed listening to it and asking questions and commenting. And I really like doing this. I hope to do it again. Anytime you want to talk to you guys, anybody you want us to talk to me, I'm always up for talking about accessibility as long as I can find the time for it.
I'm going to post your email again in the chat area. What was your @ Twitter?
Darrell, Darrell. Yeah, I know, as an early adopter. A lot of people are like, oh gosh, you've got your first name on Twitter.
Just want to remind everyone you can download the PDF version of the iOS accessibility notes from the files pod in the lower right. It is in PDF. If you need the TXT file, please contact us at ihd@nu.edu.
Wonderful.
Lindsay states, thanks again. This is wonderful.
Hi, Lindsay.
She says, hi, great job, Darrell.
Thanks.
I wonder if you can, while we have a little pause here, if you don't mind talking about earlier, before we started the webinar, you had mentioned a website, ARIA, in conjunction with, I think,
Web accessibility?
Yeah, web accessibility, WC3, and then standards versus law. Maybe, could you unpack that for us a little bit?
Sure. Okay, so when it comes to websites, you're right, there's different kind of accessibility. We've been talking about mobile apps today on the iOS platform specifically. And again, Android also has an accessibility solution, so we're just not talking about that today. Websites have two standards related to accessibility that are internationally recognized standards. One is called WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Those are international guidelines, primarily more kind of traditional static websites. There are things like make sure you have alt tags for all images, make sure that everything can be accessible from the keyboard, things like that. Then there's ARIA, Accessible Rich Internet Applications. And ARIA is an international standard that came out in response to the fact that that most websites, well, I'll say many websites are now, instead of being websites, they're more like desktop apps that you can install on your computer. They look more like that. So think, Google apps, like think Google Docs, Google Sheets, things like that. ARIA governs those. It's an international standard similar to WCAG, but it governs accessibility for rich internet application type websites. Both of those standards are recognized standards. They're worked on and revised from time to time. I was talking about the law because, and I mentioned a few times in the webinar that we have, certain kinds of organizations and agencies and governments and things like that need to buy accessible. That's according to, in the United States, that's according to Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act. And there are other state laws in some states that regulate accessibility. And then, of course, there's EU regulations in Europe and there's regulations in other parts of the world. Anyway, so there's a law, Section 508 of the United States Rehabilitation Act, and then there are standards that go with that, Section 508 standards. Unfortunately, those standards are not as robust as something like ARIA or WCAG. They're just older standards. I think they're based on like the year 2000, maybe. They're pretty old and they just don't really have dynamic websites and things like that and iOS apps and things like that in mind. But it's generally understood that if you're following things like ARIA, WCAG, or if you're following Apple's accessibility guidelines in the case of iOS apps, or the Android accessibility guidelines, or if you're writing a Windows program, if you're following Microsoft's accessibility best practices, then you're going to be fine with respect to Section 508, and a government agency could buy accessible and be protected.
Thank you. I have a couple of other thank yous. Julie Lukert says thank you, and Norbert Woolsey says thanks, a big help.
All right.
I've also put in the chat area a link to a evaluation for this webinar. It will be in an email that's sent out to all participants as well. But if you wanted to wait at the end of the webinar and click on that link, you can go evaluate right now.
I would encourage you all to do that. As we all know, it's harder to do it after the fact. So if you got a few minutes now, go ahead and let them know how I did. So I love to get feedback, so I know what I can do better next time I do a thing like this. Wow, I can't believe it's almost over.
Well, things are slowing down.
Okay.
We'll let people write questions if they'd like to, but any parting comments? Anything you want to put a cap to the end of the webinar?
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts on the state of accessibility, or maybe some predictions as to new technologies or things that you're excited about?
Wow. Okay. So first, I'm going to say a few things. I do this accessibility evangelism thing a lot, and it feels like I get an occasional victory. However, I often feel like I'm banging my head against many, many brick walls along the way. And Allison sometimes reminds me that the concept of starfish is really important. And it's basically a story about how there was a kid who was throwing starfish back into the sea that had been, beached. And she's throwing the starfish back in the sea, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands of these little starfish, lying and down the beach on the sand. This guy comes along and is like, why are you bothering to do that? There's thousands of these things. You could never throw all of them back into the sea. And she takes a starfish and throws it in, and she's like, well, I made a difference for that one. At least I made a difference for that one. So I have to remember that. I often have to remember that because accessibility evangelism is pretty heartbreaking because a lot of times you write to companies and either they actively don't want to do it, or more often than not, you've written to some support person and just no matter how you explain it, has no clue what you're talking about, and they're not going to escalate it to somebody who might. And then when that happens, then it just gets more complicated because you have to wind your way through the chain of command, and it's just really kind of heartbreaking. So I remember starfish. So predictions. Yes, I'm very concerned. I listen to a lot of mainstream podcasts and news programs and things, and we're not part of the conversation. There's new technologies, there's virtual reality, augmented reality, the concept of self-driving cars. Wouldn't it be horrible if a self-driving car came out, but then the user interface wasn't accessible? It'd be a car that a blind person should be able to drive. It doesn't require a driver's license anymore, but they make the user interface inaccessible. That would be pretty heartbreaking.
I don't like to think about that.
No, but seriously, it could happen though. Things like that happen. Augmented reality. Think about Pokemon Go. Think about the game. Everybody's crazy about Pokemon Go. Totally inaccessible. I understand there would be features in that could be hard to make accessible, but a number of us have figured out ways that the company could have tried to make at least some of it accessible. But it's not, and we are not. Just keep in mind, with augmented reality, virtual reality, self-driving cars, all these things, we are almost never a part of the conversation. We have got to change that somehow. We have got to change that. We've got to write letters to companies, and I mean well-considered letters to company CEOs and leadership, written and sent as certified letters by small core groups of advocates who know what they're talking about. I'm talking about, if necessary, going en masse to people's offices with 10 or 20 people with disabilities with a clear goal, a clear leader and a clear goal, and staying there until we get heard. In other words, I'm talking about, I guess, lightweight protesting, and stuff that will get some media attention to accessibility. It's time. We could be left behind, and I don't want that. I don't want that for us. My baby daughter has glaucoma. She's going to be some kind of low vision when she's older, and I'd like her to experience a much more accessible world than I experience today.
Thank you, Daryl. We are right up on the time here.
You're welcome.
I want to say thank you very much for allowing me to be part of this experience.
Thanks.
Hope we get to do it again.
I do too.
And from my end, I'd like to say goodbye to everyone and say thank you for participating and asking questions. We're about 1 minute away from 4:15, or it is 4:15 now. So,
Okay.
I guess we can say our goodbyes.
Bye, everybody.
Carol says, thank you so much for the help.
Awesome. You are welcome.
We have a thanks from Rita. Thank you for all your knowledge from Beth Tucker. And Lindsay says bye and thank you.
You are also welcome. Thanks for being part of it.
All right, we're going to go webinar silent in 3, 2,